They called me a dusty bookworm and laughed when I lost everything in the divorce. Jasper Cross even offered me a job cleaning his toilets. But today, the joke stopped. Because what Jasper doesn't know is that the $120 million investment he's begging for, it's mine. And his firing papers? I've already signed them. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Not the applause. Not the cameras. The sound of Jasper Cross dropping his glass of water against the polished stage floor at the Beverly Meridian Hotel in Los Angeles. It cracked once, then rolled in a slow circle under the investor table while 2,000 people stared at me like I'd walked out of the wrong life. Jasper kept smiling for almost 3 full seconds after Caleb introduced me. That was the strange part. His face understood before his mouth did. Behind him, the giant LED screen still displayed the merger presentation for Aura Dynamics. Blue graphics. Artificial intelligence projections. Market expansion forecasts. The future, according to Jasper. In the bottom corner of the screen was a logo most people in the room barely recognized. Evergreen Capital. My family's company. The company Jasper thought belonged to silent investors overseas. The company he'd been dismantling for almost a year. The company I inherited 6 weeks after my divorce. I remember the freezing air conditioning inside the ballroom. The smell of coffee burned onto silver heaters near the catering tables. The vibration of my phone in my jacket pocket. 37 unread messages. Most from Claire. At the center aisle, Sophia Vance looked at me the same way she used to look at hotel staff. Like I wasn't fully visible. Then Caleb handed me the microphone. And Jasper finally stopped smiling. I think, I said, hearing my own voice echo through the ballroom. You've been spending my money. The room went silent so fast I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing above the stage. What nobody in that ballroom understood yet was that Jasper wasn't the person who betrayed me. Not even close. Before all of it collapsed, my life smelled like dust and wet cardboard. Claire and I ran a second-hand book warehouse outside Boston. Most mornings started with cold coffee and the hum of delivery trucks backing into the alley behind the building. The warehouse had warped wooden floors that creaked whenever winter moisture settled into the beams. People imagine bookstores as romantic places. They aren't. Mostly they smell like mildew and exhausted people trying to survive. Claire hated it by the end. I noticed the change slowly. Different perfume. Longer gym sessions. Her phone face down beside the sink. She started correcting the way I dressed before meetings with antique dealers. Said I looked invisible. Said I carried myself like someone waiting to apologize. Then she started flying to Seattle twice a month. Aura Dynamics had hired her as a branding consultant after one of their executives discovered our rare manuscript collection online. That was where she met Jasper. At first, I thought she was just impressed by him. Everybody was. He had that polished tech founder charisma that made people forgive him before he'd even done anything wrong. Expensive watches. Controlled voice. Tailored jackets that never wrinkled. The first time I met him was at an Aura holiday party in Seattle. Rain hammered the windows all night. I remember standing near the bar holding a sweating glass of bourbon while Jasper looked at my shoes longer than necessary. Not mocking me directly. Worse. Amused. Sophia stayed close beside him that night. She wasn't officially with him yet, but she moved through the room like she already owned half the company. Sharp white dress. Silver bracelet that clicked softly against her wine glass every time she laughed. Claire spent most of that evening away from me. When we got back to the hotel, she stared out the window at the traffic below and asked whether I'd ever thought about selling the warehouse. 2 weeks later, she asked for a divorce. No screaming. No drama. Just papers laid flat across our kitchen table beside a bowl of untouched oranges. The refrigerator hummed behind us the entire time. She said we wanted different lives. I believed her. At least initially. Then my grandfather died 3 days after the divorce finalized. And everything stopped making sense. My grandfather, Warren Hayes, spent 40 years pretending to be ordinary. That sounds dramatic now, But at the time, it genuinely felt true. He wore the same brown coat every winter, ate canned soup 3 nights a week, worked inside a private university library nobody outside Massachusetts had ever heard of. At his funeral, only 14 people attended. Then a man I'd never seen before handed me a black envelope after the burial. No logo. Just my name pressed into the paper. Inside was a meeting address in Manhattan and a single sentence. You've been intentionally excluded from your family history. That was the moment the paranoia started. The office belonged to Evergreen Capital. I didn't even recognize the name. By midnight, I was sitting inside a conference room overlooking the Hudson River while attorneys explained that my grandfather had quietly built one of the oldest private investment structures in the country. Shipping, defense contracts, telecommunications, then tech. Aura Dynamics was one of its largest holdings. Controlling stake. Board authority. Voting power. Mine now. I remember touching the edge of the conference table because I thought I might pass out. The surface was ice cold. The attorneys kept talking about fiduciary responsibility while I stared at a digital ownership chart glowing on the wall monitor. Jasper Cross wasn't the owner of Aura. He was an employee. A very rich employee. And according to Evergreen's internal reports, someone inside the company had been liquidating assets through shell acquisitions for nearly 11 months. The losses were hidden inside future growth projections. Most investors never would notice. But my grandfather had noticed. That was why he changed his will 6 months before dying. That was why he left everything to me. Not because I was successful. Because I was invisible. 3 days later, Caleb arrived in Boston. We'd known each other since college. Back then, he slept in my apartment for 4 months after his father disappeared during a federal fraud investigation. He became a corporate attorney partly because of it. When I showed him the documents, he stopped joking completely. That scared me more than the inheritance. He spent an hour reviewing transaction histories under the yellow warehouse lights while rain tapped against the loading dock outside. Finally, he asked whether Claire knew any of this. I said no. Then he pointed at a payment authorization buried inside Aura's acquisition records. The approval timestamp matched one of Claire's Seattle trips exactly. At 2:14 that morning, standing inside a freezing warehouse filled with forgotten books, I started believing my ex-wife helped steal my family's company. But something still bothered me. The numbers didn't fully line up. Too much money was disappearing. And some transactions weren't benefiting Jasper at all. They were hurting him. That made no sense. For a while, the story felt simple. Painful, but simple. Claire had left me for money. Jasper was using Aura Dynamics to fund a private merger scheme. Sophia was helping move assets offshore before the company collapsed. Caleb and I started watching everything quietly. He posed publicly as my driver whenever we traveled to Seattle. Nobody looked twice at him that way. People stop seeing individuals once they think they understand the hierarchy. That was the first lesson I learned about wealthy people. They only notice power. The Aura headquarters smelled like marble cleaner and espresso beans. Huge glass walls overlooked Elliott Bay. Everywhere you walked, screens displayed motivational phrases about innovation. Meanwhile, entire departments were quietly being sold. One evening, I waited outside a private lounge during an executive fundraiser while Jasper and Sophia met investors upstairs. Rainwater dripped from my coat onto the black tile floor. A valet nearby kept scrolling sports scores on his phone, while jazz music echoed through hidden ceiling speakers. That was when I saw Claire leave Jasper's suite elevator alone. She looked terrified. Not guilty. Terrified. She nearly walked past me before recognizing me beside the entrance doors. Her makeup was smudged beneath one eye. She asked whether I'd been following her. I told her no. Technically true. Then she said something that stayed with me for weeks. She said Jasper kept recordings of everyone. Not emails. Not contracts. Recordings. Voice files. Hotel footage. Private calls. Insurance. I thought she was trying to manipulate me, especially after Caleb uncovered encrypted transfers connected to Sophia's consulting firm. The pieces fit too perfectly. By then, even I wanted the story to be simple. Betrayal is easier to survive when the villains are obvious. So we prepared for the investor forum in Los Angeles. Caleb gathered enough evidence to remove Jasper immediately after the merger announcement. Federal regulators were already reviewing the shell companies. I barely slept the week before the conference. Every night, I kept replaying small moments with Claire. Her anxiety. Her shaking hands. The way she checked parking garages before entering her car. I told myself guilt explained it. Then 2 nights before the forum, Caleb sent me security footage from inside Aura headquarters. Silent black and white footage. Timestamped 1:12 a.m. Claire entering Jasper's office. Then leaving 23 minutes later, carrying a cardboard archive box. Inside the box was a row of old recording tapes. Not digital drives. Actual tapes. And written across one label in black marker was my grandfather's name. That was the moment the entire story broke apart again. Because my grandfather died before Claire ever joined Aura. Which meant Jasper had been watching my family long before he met my wife. I stopped sleeping after that. The world started feeling staged. Like I'd walked into the middle of a play after missing the first hour. Caleb finally admitted he discovered something worse weeks earlier, but withheld it until he confirmed it. My grandfather and Jasper knew each other personally. Not professionally. Personally. There were photographs. Private dinners. Fundraisers. Boat registrations. The relationship went back 15 years. That made no sense to me because my grandfather used to pretend he barely understood smartphones. Then Caleb uncovered the real structure behind Evergreen Capital. It wasn't just an investment fund. It was a surveillance network, corporate intelligence, behavioral prediction, reputation acquisition. My grandfather invested in companies by collecting leverage against executives long before buying them. Hotel cameras, financial pressure, personal weaknesses. Evergreen didn't merely purchase businesses. It cornered people psychologically. Aura Dynamics became valuable because its software could automate large-scale behavioral analysis. Jasper wasn't dismantling the company. He was trying to escape Evergreen before the board trapped him permanently. Suddenly, Claire's fear made sense. Sophia's transfers made sense. Even the recordings made sense. They weren't blackmail trophies. They were protection. Evidence. Jasper had been secretly copying Evergreen's archives before disappearing with the merger money. He planned to vanish after the Los Angeles conference. That was why Clara looked terrified. She wasn't helping him steal from me. She was helping him survive my family. When I finally confronted her privately inside the hotel parking garage beneath the Forum Center, she looked exhausted beyond recognition. Concrete pillars sweated moisture from the cold air. A ventilation fan rattled overhead. She admitted she discovered Evergreen accidentally after overhearing Jasper panic during a late-night call. Then she found files connected to my grandfather. Judges. Executives. Politicians. People quietly manipulated for decades. She said Jasper became paranoid after learning Evergreen planned to replace him before the merger. Then she looked directly at me and asked a question I still hear sometimes at night. She asked whether I truly believed my grandfather randomly chose me after years of distance. I didn't answer, because by then I already knew. He chose me because I was useful, invisible, emotionally dependent, easy to shape. That was when Claire told me the final thing she'd hidden. The divorce had been my grandfather's idea. Years earlier. He believed attachment made people weak. Claire cried while saying it. But even then, she stayed emotionally controlled, like someone already numb from carrying too much fear. My grandfather paid her to leave me gradually. Not because she stopped loving me. Because he needed me isolated before handing me Evergreen. I remember staring at the condensation sliding down concrete pipes behind her while my entire marriage rearranged itself in my head. The bookstore. The Seattle introductions. Aura Dynamics. Even Jasper. It had all started long before I realized I was inside it. Then Claire handed me a flash drive. She said if Jasper disappeared, Evergreen would bury everything permanently. But if I exposed Jasper publicly first, the archives would become evidence instead of leverage. That was the real war. Not money. Control. The investor forum began at noon. By then I understood enough to feel sick, but not enough to escape. The ballroom smelled like expensive cologne and overheated projector equipment. Investors laughed softly over polished silverware, while Aura's promotional videos looped across giant screens. Jasper walked onstage looking exhausted beneath the makeup. Only I noticed. Sophia avoided eye contact entirely. Then the merger presentation began. Caleb sat beside me in the back row wearing black gloves because the air conditioning inside the ballroom was painfully cold. My phone kept vibrating. Unknown numbers. Blocked calls. One voicemail after another. Evergreen board members. I didn't answer. Halfway through Jasper's speech, the giant screen behind him flickered once. Then again. He froze immediately. That told me everything. Because only one person besides Jasper knew those archive files existed. Me. The screen switched from merger projections to surveillance footage. Politicians. Executives. Hotel rooms. Private conversations. Decades of leverage collected by Evergreen Capital. Gasps spread across the ballroom. Then came the final video. My grandfather. Recorded 2 months before his death. He sat alone inside the university library basement under dim fluorescent lights. He looked directly into the camera and explained why he chose me. Not because I was trustworthy. Because I resembled him most. Patient. Resentful. Quiet enough to let people underestimate me. Then he said something colder than anything Jasper ever did. He said power only survives through inheritance if the next man is willing to become morally identical to the previous one. The room felt completely silent after that. Even the projector fans sounded distant. Then Jasper looked at me across the stage. And for the first time since I'd met him, I realized he was afraid of me. Not because I exposed him. Because he believed I would continue what Evergreen started. Security removed him minutes later. Sophia disappeared through a service exit before federal agents reached the ballroom. The merger collapsed instantly. Aura stock crashed by closing bell. News outlets spent weeks calling it one of the largest corporate scandals in modern tech history. But that isn't the twist people misunderstand. The real twist came 3 months later, after the investigations, after Claire disappeared into witness protection, after I converted the Boston warehouse into the Hayes Center for Public Education. People treated me like the survivor. The decent man who defeated corrupt elites. That wasn't true. Because the archive leak at the forum wasn't Jasper's plan. It was mine. I released everything before Evergreen could contain it. Not out of morality. Out of inheritance. My grandfather understood something I didn't admit until much later. Information destroys people more efficiently than money ever can. The leak erased rivals, destroyed board members, collapsed competitors, and transferred enormous public trust directly toward me. Exactly where it needed to go. The educational foundation. The new companies. The restructured assets. All under my control. Even Caleb didn't fully understand until the end. Neither did Claire. They thought I rejected Evergreen. I didn't. I modernized it. Sometimes at night, I still walk through the old warehouse after everyone leaves. The building smells cleaner now. Fresh paint instead of mildew. Digital archives instead of collapsing shelves. But the silence feels identical. Cold. Watchful. Inherited. And every time I hear the security cameras rotating above the hallways, I remember what my grandfather said about power. Then I lock the doors myself.